After 62 years of sacrifice, Mary and Arthur were told they were expired. On a freezing Christmas night, their 4 children dumped them on the side of a deserted road, handing them a wet envelope with just $200 inside. That was the price they put on their parents' lives. But while they were shivering in the rain, a ghost from their past was frantically searching for them. They didn't know it yet, but a single act of kindness from 40 years ago was about to explode into an $8 million miracle. And when the sun rose the next morning, the tables turned in a way that would make their greedy children regret the day they were born. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. There are stories that, no matter how painful, must still be told. The rain fell like tears from the sky that afternoon on December 25th. The drops hit the windshield of the SUV with an insistence that seemed to foreshadow something terrible. Mary looked out the back window, her wrinkled hands trembling slightly as she clutched her worn purse. Beside her, Arthur tried to maintain his composure, although his tired eyes reflected a growing worry. They had spent 62 years together, over 6 decades of love, sacrifice, shared joys, and sorrows. They had built a life from nothing, raising 4 children and working themselves to exhaustion to provide everything they never had growing up. And now, at 83 years old, Mary couldn't help but feel a pit in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. "Where are we going exactly?" asked Mary with a trembling voice, addressing her eldest son Mason, who was driving with his jaw clenched and his eyes fixed on the dark highway. "We already told you, Mom. We need to resolve some things," answered Mason with a cold tone that Mary barely recognized. This wasn't the boy she had cradled in her arms, the one who cried when he had nightmares and ran to her seeking comfort. In the passenger seat sat Harper, the second daughter. She didn't even turn to look at her mother. She was simply looking at her iPhone, swiping her finger across the screen with an expression of absolute boredom. Caleb and Emily sat in the middle row, refusing to make eye contact, while Mary and Arthur were crammed into the tight third row of the SUV. Neither of the younger children said a word. The silence emanating from them was colder than the storm raging outside. Mary looked down at her lap, remembering the humiliation of that morning. She recalled how Mason had stormed into their small apartment, tossing black garbage bags at them. "You have 1 hour," he had barked. "Anything that doesn't fit in these bags goes to the dump. We are clearing this place out by noon." Arthur had tried to save his war medals and Mary's old recipe book, but Harper had snatched them away, throwing them into the trash bin with a look of disgust. "This is junk," she had sneered. "Expired junk for expired people. Stop clinging to trash." That word expired had rung in Mary's ears all day. They weren't just being moved. They were being discarded like rotten fruit. Arthur squeezed Mary's hand. His fingers, deformed by years of hard work in construction, intertwined with hers in a gesture that spoke more than 1,000 words. 62 years together had taught them to communicate without needing to speak. And in that moment, they both felt the same thing: fear. The SUV took a detour onto a back road. The trees closed in over them like dark arms, and the lights of the city were left further and further behind. Mary felt her heart race. Something wasn't right. Something was definitely not right. "Mason, son, why are we leaving the city?" asked Arthur, his voice still firm despite his age. "You said we were going to have dinner together for Christmas." "Change of plans, Dad," replied Mason without any emotion. Mary exchanged a look with Arthur. In her husband's eyes, she saw the same terror she felt. After a lifetime together, after sacrificing everything for the 4 people who now surrounded them with stone faces, how had it all reached this point? The memory hit Mary with the force of a tidal wave. 20 years ago, when Mason had lost his job and was about to lose his house, Mary and Arthur had sold their small family business, a convenience store they had built with decades of effort, to give Mason the money he needed. $50,000. That represented their entire nest egg, their entire future, their entire security. They had done it without thinking twice, because he was their son, their firstborn, and children always come first. "Don't worry," Mason had told them then with tears in his eyes. "I will pay back every cent, and when you are older, I will take care of everything. You will never lack for anything." But the years passed, and the money never returned. And now, 20 years later, Mary and Arthur lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment, surviving on a miserable Social Security check that barely covered the basics. The SUV slowed down and finally stopped in the middle of nowhere. The road was deserted, surrounded by dense trees and absolute darkness. The rain beat harder now, creating a deafening roar against the roof of the vehicle. "Why are we stopping here?" asked Mary, and for the first time, her voice broke completely. Mason turned off the engine. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. Then, slowly, he turned to look at his parents. His eyes, which once shone with childish love, were now empty, cold as ice. "Mom, Dad," he began, and Mary noticed there wasn't a shred of emotion in his voice. "We've been talking, the four of us, Harper, Caleb, Emily, and I, and we've reached a decision." "What decision?" whispered Arthur, although something inside him already knew the answer. Harper turned around then, and a cruel smile appeared on her perfectly painted lips. She had been the spoiled one, the princess of the family. Mary remembered how she had worked cleaning houses at night, on top of her regular job, to pay for the private university Harper wanted so much. $40,000 in loans that Mary and Arthur had co-signed, ensuring their daughter had the education they never could have. "The decision is that we can no longer carry you," said Harper, with a coldness that froze Mary's blood. "You are a financial burden. You are an emotional burden. And frankly, we are tired." Mary felt as if a knife had been driven into her chest. Her daughter's words echoed in her mind over and over again. "A burden, a burden, a burden. How can you say that?" Arthur's voice trembled for the first time in decades. "We gave you everything, everything we had." Caleb, the third of the children, finally spoke. His voice was monotone, practiced, as if he had rehearsed these words many times. "That was your decision, not ours. No one asked you to sacrifice so much, and now that you are old and sick, you expect us to abandon our lives to take care of you. It's not fair." Mary remembered the countless nights she had spent awake when Caleb was a child and suffered from severe asthma. She remembered the races to the ER, the expensive medications that she and Arthur paid for regardless of the cost, the times she herself stopped eating to make sure Caleb had everything he needed. They had saved his life more than once, and now he looked at her as if she were a stranger, as if she were a problem to solve. Emily, the youngest, the one who had always been the quietest, spoke for the first time all night. "We found a home," she said softly, as if that somehow made her words less cruel. "A place where you can stay. It's for people like you." "People like us?" asked Mary, tears beginning to roll down her wrinkled cheeks. "What does that mean?" "Elderly people with no resources," replied Mason. "There is a shelter about 20 miles from here. You can go there, or you can figure it out however you can, but you can no longer live with any of us, and we are not going to keep supporting you." Mary's world collapsed in that moment. It couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. These weren't her children. The children she had raised, loved, protected with every fiber of her being. The children for whom she had given up her dreams, her comfort, her future. "Please," pleaded Mary, her voice breaking into sobs. "Please, don't do this to us. We are your parents. We love you. We have always loved you." But her words fell on deaf ears. Mason was already getting out of the SUV, opening the back door. The rain entered immediately, soaking Mary and Arthur. "Get out," ordered Mason. "Now, Mason," shouted Arthur, his voice now full of desperation. "I am your father. How can you do this to us on Christmas? How can you abandon us like this?" But Mason simply looked at them with empty eyes. Caleb and Emily got out of the vehicle on the other side, leaving space for the elderly couple to get out. Harper didn't even bother to turn around. She kept looking at her phone, indifferent to the drama unfolding around her. Mary and Arthur had no other choice. With slow and painful movements, they got out of the SUV. The rain hit them immediately, soaking them to the bone in a matter of seconds. Mary stumbled, and Arthur held her with trembling arms. "And our things?" asked Mary, clinging to any piece of hope. "Our clothes? Our medications?" Mason opened the trunk and took out 2 small suitcases. He threw them onto the muddy ground next to his parents. The suitcases opened on impact, and Mary's clothes began to get soaked immediately. "This is all you need," said Mason. "And this," he took an envelope from his pocket and threw it as well. "There's $200 here. It's more than you deserve. considering everything you've asked of us over the years." Mary stared at the envelope in the mud, tears mixing with the rain on her face. $200. That was what 62 years of sacrifice for her children was worth. $200. Miserable dollars. It is truly heartbreaking to think that a lifetime of parental love was valued so cheaply by the very people they raised. But hang on, because while this looks like the end for Mary and Arthur, fate has a massive surprise in store that will make those children regret this moment forever. "Don't do this," pleaded Arthur one last time. "Please, kids, we are a family." But Mason was already back in the driver's seat. Caleb and Emily got in too without looking back even once. Harper finally looked up from her phone, looked at her soaked and shattered parents in the rain, and then smiled slightly before returning her attention to the screen. The engine roared again. The taillights turned on, bathing Mary and Arthur in a blood-red glow, and then the SUV began to drive away. Mary screamed. It was a scream that came from the deepest part of her soul, a scream of pain so intense it tore through the night. She ran after the truck, her old legs stumbling in the mud, her arms outstretched toward her children who were driving away. "No, please, don't leave us. We love you. We have always loved you." Her voice broke into heartbreaking sobs as the SUV accelerated, the lights disappearing into the darkness of the storm. Arthur caught up to her and held her as she collapsed. The freezing mud seeped instantly through Mary's thin cotton dress, biting into her skin like 1,000 needles. Arthur tried to pull her up, but his arthritic knees locked in the cold, sending sharp bolts of agony up his legs. He gasped, his breath forming a weak cloud in the icy air. They weren't just abandoned. They were being left to die. At 83, their bodies were fragile vessels, shivering violently as the harsh wind whipped against their soaked clothes, turning their skin a pale, deathly blue. Her knees giving way, her body shaken by uncontrollable sobs, they fell together into the mud, hugging, while the rain kept falling without mercy and the darkness wrapped around them completely. They were alone, completely alone on a deserted road, abandoned by the very human beings they had brought into the world, whom they had raised with infinite love, whom they had always put above everything else. "What did we do wrong?" sobbed Mary against Arthur's chest. "What did we do wrong to deserve this?" Arthur had no answer. He could only hug her tighter while his own tears mixed with the rain. In his 83 years of life, he had faced poverty, illness, loss, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the pain of being abandoned by his own children. The storm roared around them, and they remained there in the middle of the empty road, two shattered elderly people wondering how the purest love they had known, the love of parents for their children, had ended in such a cruel way. They didn't know how much time passed. It could have been minutes or hours. The cold had soaked into their bones, and Mary was beginning to shake violently. Arthur knew they had to move. They had to find shelter or hypothermia would kill them before dawn. With superhuman effort, he helped Mary up. They picked up their soaked suitcases and the envelope with the money from the mud. Arthur took Mary's hand, and they began to walk down the road, not knowing where they were going, not knowing what the future held for them. They only knew one thing for certain. Their children had abandoned them on Christmas, and that betrayal, that wound in their hearts, would never heal. They walked for what seemed like an eternity. The road stretched before them like a dark snake, with no end in sight. Mary's feet hurt with every step. Her old shoes, which already had holes before tonight, were now completely destroyed, and the cold water seeped in with every step she took. Arthur wasn't in any better condition. His back, which had endured decades of heavy work in construction, screamed in agony with every movement. "We have to keep going," murmured Arthur. More to himself than to Mary. "We have to keep going." Mary could barely breathe. The sobs had given way to an emotional numbness that was almost worse. She felt empty, as if everything that had once made her who she was had been ripped from inside her and thrown into the mud along with her suitcases. She remembered every sacrifice as if it were yesterday. She remembered when Mason was 7 and wanted a bicycle for his birthday. They had no money, but Mary worked double shifts for 2 months, cleaning offices at night after her regular job to buy him that bike. She remembered the light in Mason's eyes when he saw it, how he had hugged her and told her, "You're the best mom in the world." Where was that boy now? What had happened to that child who loved her so much? She remembered when Harper got sick at 12 with a severe kidney infection. The doctors said she needed an expensive surgery that insurance didn't cover completely. Mary and Arthur had mortgaged their house, the small house they had taken 15 years to pay off, to cover the medical expenses. Harper had survived, she had thrived, and now that same Harper had looked at her with contempt before abandoning her on a deserted road. The memories kept coming, each one more painful than the last. Caleb and his asthma, Emily and her learning disabilities that required years of expensive therapy, the countless sleepless nights, the meals Mary and Arthur skipped so their children could eat, the clothes they never bought so their children could dress well. It had all been for love. Every sacrifice, every pain, every giving up, it had all been for love, and this was how they repaid them. "Look," said Arthur suddenly, his hoarse voice breaking the silence. "There's a light ahead." Mary looked up. Sure enough, in the distance, a faint glow could be seen. As they got closer, they made out a small gas station on the side of the road. It was old and looked almost abandoned, but there was light inside, and that was the only thing that mattered in that moment. They sped up as best they could, and finally reached the door. An electronic chime sounded when they entered, and the heat from the interior hit them like a wave. Mary almost collapsed with the relief of finally being out of the rain. Behind the counter was a young man, maybe 30, with tattoos on his arms and an unshaven beard. He looked at them with surprise, seeing two elderly people soaked and muddy entering his gas station at that time of night. "Good Lord," he exclaimed, "what happened to you?" Mary opened her mouth to answer, but the words didn't come out. How to explain to a stranger what her own children had done to them? How to put into words such a deep betrayal? Arthur spoke in her place, his voice barely a whisper. "They left us here. Our children left us on the road." The young man blinked, clearly confused. "How? Why would anyone do that? Especially on Christmas?" "I don't know," replied Arthur, and for the first time that night he began to cry openly. "I don't know anything anymore." The young man quickly came out from behind the counter. His expression had gone from surprise to genuine compassion. "Look, I have a small room in the back. It's basic, but it's dry and warm. You can stay there tonight and let me make you something hot to drink." Mary finally found her voice. "We don't have much money." "I don't want your money," the young man interrupted firmly. "No one should be outside on a night like this, especially not people like you. Come, follow me." He led them through a back door into a small room that he evidently used as storage and an office. There were boxes stacked against the walls, but also an old sofa and a table with a coffee maker. The young man began moving boxes, making space. "My name is Justin," he said as he worked. "My grandparents raised me." "So," his voice broke slightly, "I can't imagine anyone doing this to them. I simply can't." He brewed hot coffee and found some old, but clean, blankets. Mary and Arthur sat on the sofa, still shivering, still in shock. Justin brought them the coffee and sat in front of them, his face full of concern. "Do you want me to call the police?" he asked. "What your children did can't be legal." Arthur shook his head slowly. "They are our children," he said with a broken voice. "No matter what they have done." "I can't, I understand," said Justin softly, "but at least let me help you. Tomorrow I can take you where you need to go. Do you have any place?" That question drove into Mary's heart like another dagger. No, they didn't have any place. Mason had taken the apartment where they lived 2 weeks ago, saying he needed it for other purposes. That's why they had accepted when their 4 children invited them to dinner together for Christmas. They had thought that maybe their children had finally recognized what they had done, that they were finally going to take care of them, as they had promised so many years ago. How naive they had been. How terribly, painfully naive. "No," whispered Mary. "We don't have any place." The silence that followed was overwhelming. Justin looked at them with deep sadness in his eyes. "Then, you stay here for now," he said finally. "It's not much, but it's something, and tomorrow we will find a solution." That night, Mary and Arthur slept hugged together on the old sofa in the back room of that gas station. Physically, they were more comfortable than on the road, but emotionally the pain was still unbearable. Mary cried in silence while Arthur held her, his own tears wetting his wife's hair. 62 years, whispered Arthur in the darkness. 62 years together, Mary. We have been through so much, but never did I think our own children. Shh, Mary comforted him, although her own heart was broken to pieces. At least we have each other. We have always had each other, and it was true. Amidst all this darkness, they still had their love, a love that had withstood 6 decades, that had survived poverty, sickness, loss. A love that even this monumental betrayal could not destroy. But as they lay there in the darkness, both wondered the same thing. How would they go on? How would they get over this? How do you live knowing that the 4 people you loved most in this world, your own flesh and blood, had discarded you like trash? They had no answers. They only had the pain, the confusion, and each other. The night stretched on endlessly. Through the small window of the room, Mary could see that the storm continued, lightning occasionally illuminating the dark sky. Every thunderclap made her jump, and memories kept coming in relentless waves. She remembered the day Mason was born. The birth had been complicated, and the doctors had told her she almost died. But when they finally put that baby in her arms, when she looked into those little eyes that looked at her with such trust, she had known she would do anything for him. She had known it with every fiber of her being, and she had done it. She had done it for Mason, for Harper, for Caleb, for Emily. She had given everything. And for what? She remembered Mason's words in the SUV. "You are a burden." Those words echoed in her mind over and over again. Each repetition was like another knife cut. After everything they had given, after all the sacrifices, this was how their children saw them. As a burden. Arthur moved beside her, and Mary knew he wasn't sleeping either. 62 years together meant they knew each other's every breath, every movement. "Are you awake?" she whispered. "Yes," he replied, his voice heavy with emotional exhaustion. "I can't stop thinking. I can't process this. Mary? It still feels like a nightmare I'm going to wake up from." "I know," she said, squeezing his hand. "I feel the same. I love them so much," continued Arthur, his voice breaking. "I loved them with everything I had. I worked until my body broke to give them a good life, and they didn't even blink leaving us there." Mary had no words of comfort. What could she say? There was no comfort for this. There was no way to soften this brutal reality. "Harper didn't even look up from her phone," said Mary, a new wave of pain passing through her. "She didn't even look at us when they abandoned us as if we were nothing to her." "Remember when she had that kidney infection?" asked Arthur. "You spent 3 weeks, sleeping in a chair at the hospital. You didn't leave her side a single night. You almost lost your job for all the absences, and the mortgage," added Mary bitterly. "We were still paying that mortgage when we turned 70. 15 extra years of payments because we had to refinance to pay for her surgery." "It was worth it," said Arthur automatically, although his voice sounded hollow, or so I thought. "I thought it had all been worth it because we saved them, because we gave them a better life than the one we had." "But it wasn't worth it," whispered Mary, the bitter truth finally settling in her heart. "We raised 4 people who can look at us and see us as a burden, who can abandon us on a road during a storm on Christmas without any remorse. What kind of people did we raise, Arthur?" That question hung in the air unanswered, because neither of them knew the answer. They had tried to raise them right, teach them kindness, compassion, gratitude. They had modeled those values with every action, every decision they made, and somehow it had failed spectacularly. "Maybe we gave them too much," said Arthur, after a long silence. "Maybe by sacrificing so much for them, we taught them to expect sacrifice, to feel that we owed them everything and that they owed us nothing in return." "No," said Mary firmly. "I'm not going to blame myself for loving them too much. Love is never the problem. The problem is something that happened in them, something I don't understand." "Do you think they were always like this?" asked Arthur. "Do you think they pretended to love us all these years?" Mary thought about that for a long moment. She remembered the smiles, the hugs, the "I love you, Mom," and "I love you, Dad" they had heard over the years. Had they been all lies, or had there been a point in time where love turned into resentment? "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I don't know what was real and what wasn't anymore. I only know that it hurts. God, Arthur, it hurts so much." And then she cried again, her sobs shaking her frail body. Arthur hugged her tighter, his own tears falling freely now. They cried together in the dark. They cried for the children they had lost, for the future they would never have, for the years of love that apparently meant nothing. Outside, the storm continued. Lightning illuminated the sky, and thunder roared as if the universe itself were expressing its rage at the injustice that had been committed tonight. Eventually, emotionally and physically exhausted, they fell asleep. But even in their dreams there was no peace. Mary dreamed of her children when they were little, with their laughter and hugs, and then the dream turned into a nightmare when those same children grew up and looked at her with cold, empty eyes, saying over and over again, "You are a 31-15 burden. You are a burden. You are a burden." She woke up with a scream trapped in her throat. The gray light of dawn filtered through the window. The storm had passed, leaving a wet and silent world in its place. Arthur was already awake, sitting on the edge of the sofa with his head in his hands. Mary sat next to him and rested her head on his shoulder. "It's December 26th, said Arthur with a hollow voice. "The day after Christmas, the day after our children abandoned us." Mary closed her eyes. Yes, it was December 26th, and somehow they had to find the strength to go on. They had to figure out how to survive in a world where their own children had discarded them. But in that moment, sitting in that back room with her husband of 62 years, Mary had no idea how they would do that. She had no idea how the pain would eventually give way to something else. She didn't know that in a few hours her life would take a turn she could never have imagined. For now, only the pain existed, and that was hard enough to bear. The door to the room opened softly, and Justin entered with a tray. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the space along with the smell of toast. "Good morning," he said softly. "I brought you breakfast." "It's not much, but you are very kind," said Mary, her voice hoarse from crying so much, too kind to two strangers. Justin placed the tray on the table and sat in front of them. There was something in his expression that suggested he wanted to say something important. "My grandparents raised me," he began. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 5. My grandparents, even though they were already old, even though they barely had resources, took me in, loved me, raised me, gave me everything they had." His eyes filled with tears. "They died 3 years ago. My grandmother first, then my grandfather 6 months later, and every day I wish I could see them one more time, thank them one more time for everything they did for me. So when I saw you last night, when I heard what your children did to you," his voice broke. "I don't understand how anyone can do that to their parents. I just don't understand." Mary felt a new wave of tears. This strange young man showed more compassion and love than her own children had shown. "Your grandparents raised a good person," she said. "They must have been very proud of you." "They were," smiled Justin sadly. "And I was proud of them." "Mrs. Mary, Mr. Arthur, I don't know what happened with your children. I don't know what made them become people capable of doing something like that, but I want you to know that the problem isn't you. You didn't do anything wrong. The problem is in them." "It doesn't feel like that," admitted Arthur. "It feels like we failed in some fundamental way." "No," said Justin firmly. "You loved. That is never a failure. They failed to receive that love with gratitude. That is their failure, not yours." They ate breakfast in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. Mary mechanically chewed the toast without really tasting it. Her mind kept replaying the events of the previous night over and over, looking for some sign she had missed, some clue that this was going to happen. But there had been no signs. Or maybe there had been, and she had been too blind to see them. She remembered small moments over the last few years, cutting comments from Harper about how they were always needing something, Mason's impatience when they called to ask for help with simple things like programming the DVD player, the way Caleb and Emily never had time to visit them. Maybe the signs had been there all along. Maybe she simply hadn't wanted to see them. They finished breakfast and Justin collected the plates, looked at his watch. "It's almost 9 a.m., he said. "Is there anyone you can call? Any friend or family member?" Mary and Arthur exchanged glances. The sad reality was that they had no one. Their whole life had revolved around their children. The friends they had drifted away over the years, or had died. The extended family was scattered all over the country, and they hadn't had real contact with any of them for years. They were alone, completely alone in the world, except for each other. "There is no one," said Arthur finally. Just the two of us." Justin nodded slowly, clearly saddened by this answer, but not surprised. "Then, this is what we'll do," he said. "You can stay in this room as long as you need. I'm not using the space for anything important. I'll bring you food and you can use the bathroom in the gas station. Meanwhile, I'll make some calls. I'll see if I can find some community resources that can help you." "We can't accept that," protested Mary. "You've already done too much." "You can and you will," said Justin with a gentle smile. "I'm not rich. This gas station barely gives me enough to live on, but I have a roof over my head and food on my table, and I'm not going to let two good people suffer when I can do something to help." It is amazing how a stranger with almost nothing, like Justin, can show more heart than the wealthy family who had everything. Justin doesn't know it yet, but this simple act of decency is about to change his life just as much as it changes theirs. Keep listening to see how this good deed comes back around. Mary felt a lump in her throat. This stranger, this young man who owed them nothing, was showing more kindness than her own children had shown in years. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to say more. Justin went to attend the gas station, and Mary and Arthur were left alone once again. Mary stood up and walked to the small window, looking out. The world looked washed and clean after the storm, the sun beginning to peek through the dispersing clouds. It was a new day, December 26th, and somehow they had to find a way to move forward. "What are we going to do, Arthur?" asked Mary, her voice barely audible. "How are we going to live with this?" Arthur approached her and hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Together they looked out the window at the outside world. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we'll figure it out like we always have. Together." "Together," repeated Mary, clinging to that word like a lifeline. They stood there for a long time, hugging, watching the sunrise of December 26th. Neither of them knew that in a few hours their world would change completely again. Neither of them could imagine that the pain they felt in this moment would soon give way to something completely unexpected. For now, they only had the present, and in the present, they had to learn to breathe again, to exist in a world where their hearts had been shattered by the same people who were supposed to love them the most. Around 11 inches the morning, Justin knocked on the door of the room again. "There's someone here who wants to see you," he said, and there was something strange in his voice, something Mary couldn't identify. "Who?" asked Arthur, standing up. "He says he is an attorney," replied Justin, "and that he needs to speak urgently with Mary and Arthur." Mary felt as if her heart stopped. An attorney? How did a lawyer know they were here? How had he found them? "Did our children send him?" she asked, panic beginning to take hold of her. "Are they coming too?" "I don't know," said Justin, "but he insists it is urgent and that he has documents you must see." Mary and Arthur looked at each other. The fear was palpable between them. What else could their children do to them? What other pain could they inflict? But they had no choice. With slow and fearful steps, they followed Justin to the gas station's small office. There, waiting for them, was a middle-aged man dressed in a dark suit. He carried a leather briefcase, and his expression was serious, but not hostile. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller?" he asked tentatively as they entered, glancing between a file in his hand and the elderly couple. "I believe you are Arthur and Mary Miller?" "Yes," replied Arthur cautiously, stepping in front of his wife instinctively. "Who are you, and how did you find us?" The man extended his hand. "My name is Robert Stevenson. I am an estate attorney, and I have been looking for you desperately since yesterday evening. Your children gave me the address of an apartment where you supposedly lived, but when I went there, the neighbors told me you had been evicted. I have been calling all the hospitals, shelters, and police stations in the area. Finally, this morning I called every gas station within a 50-mile radius. Young Justin here told me you were with him." Mary and Arthur didn't know what to say. Why would a lawyer be looking for them so desperately? Robert Stevenson opened his briefcase and took out several documents. "I need you to sit down," he said. "What I have to tell you will change your lives completely." With trembling hands, Mary and Arthur sat down. Justin stood by the door, clearly as curious as he was worried. Robert Stevenson looked at them with an expression that was part compassion, part something Mary couldn't quite identify. It was respect. 3 months ago it began. "I received a call from a man named William Peterson. He was in the hospital dying of cancer and urgently needed to make legal arrangements before his death." Mary felt the name sound familiar, but couldn't place it. "William Peterson died 2 weeks ago," continued Robert. "But before dying, he gave me very specific instructions. He told me about two people who had saved him many years ago. Two people who, according to him, had given him his life back when he had nothing. Those two people were you. The world seemed to stop. Mary searched her memory, trying to remember, and then it hit her like a lightning bolt. William, she whispered. William, the young man who lived on the street. The very same, confirmed Robert, a small smile appearing on his face. He told me the whole story, how 40 years ago, when he was just 19 and living on the streets, addicted to drugs and without hope, you found him one winter night. He told me he was about to die of cold and that you, even though you barely had resources of your own, took him into your home, fed him, clothed him, gave him a place to stay. Mary remembered now. She remembered it vividly. Arthur had found William curled up in an alley, shivering and delirious. They had had a long debate that night about what to do. They had 3 small children at home, and money barely stretched, but they couldn't leave him there to die. I remember making him tomato soup that first night, Mary whispered, her eyes lost in the memory. He was shaking so hard he couldn't hold the spoon. I had to feed him like a baby. And you, Arthur, you gave him your only heavy winter coat the next morning so he could go look for work, even though it meant you had to walk to the construction site in just a flannel shirt for months. We gave him the sofa because it was the warmest spot in the house, right next to the heater. 8 months, replied Arthur, his own voice trembling with the memory. He stayed 8 months. We helped him overcome the addiction, get a job, get back on his feet, and then one day he just disappeared, continued Mary. He left a note saying, "Thank you," but we never heard from him again. Sometimes I wondered what had happened to him. Robert Stevenson smiled more broadly. Now I'm going to tell you what happened to him. He took the job you helped him get at that small cleaning company. He worked hard, studied at night, got his GED, and then a degree in business administration. Eventually, he started his own commercial cleaning service company. He built it from scratch, working 16 hours a day for years. Mary and Arthur listened with growing amazement. His company grew, continued Robert. He began getting contracts with corporate buildings, then with entire office complexes. 10 years ago, he sold his company for a very considerable sum. He invested wisely, diversified his portfolio, and when he died 2 weeks ago, William Peterson was a very wealthy man. The silence in the room was absolute. Justin had his mouth open. Mary and Arthur simply couldn't process what they were hearing. And he dedicated the last months of his life to finding you, said Robert. He hired private investigators, spent thousands of dollars looking for you. He told me that you had saved his life, and that he had never been able to thank you properly. He told me he thought of you every day, that everything he had achieved was thanks to the kindness you showed him when no one else would have. Robert opened one of the documents and placed it in front of Mary and Arthur. This is the last will and testament of William Peterson, he said, and in it he leaves you his entire estate. Mary looked at the document, but the words blurred in front of her teary eyes. She couldn't focus, couldn't read. How much? Asked Arthur, his voice barely a whisper. Robert Stevenson looked them directly in the eyes. After taxes and legal fees, the inheritance is approximately $8 million, plus a fully paid-off house in a very nice neighborhood, a new car that is currently in my garage waiting for you, and a trust fund established specifically to cover any medical expenses you may have for the rest of your lives. Can you imagine the shock washing over Mary and Arthur right now? After being treated like expired goods, they are suddenly valued at millions, proving that no act of kindness is ever truly wasted. And the best part is, their greedy children don't get a single dime. The world tilted. Mary felt everything spinning around her. $8 million. $8 million. After being abandoned on a road like trash, after having only $200 to their name, after having nowhere to go. It can't be real, she whispered. This can't be real. It is completely real, assured Robert. I have all the documents here. Once you sign them, the money will be transferred to an account in your name. The house will be yours. Everything will be yours. William was very specific in his instructions. He wanted to make sure the rest of your lives were comfortable, that you never had to worry about money again. Arthur began to cry. They weren't tears of pain this time, but of something so complex and overwhelming that Mary had no words to describe it. It was relief, gratitude, awe, pain for everything they had lost, joy for what they had gained, all mixed in a whirlwind of emotions impossible to untangle. "We showed him kindness," said Arthur between sobs. "That's all we did. We were just kind to someone who needed it. And he never forgot it," said Robert. "He made me promise him on his deathbed that I would find you, that I would make sure you knew how much it meant to him. He made me promise to tell you that you were the only people in his entire life who showed him unconditional love, and that love saved him." Mary couldn't stop crying. All the emotions of the last 24 hours poured out of her in an unstoppable flood. The pain of being abandoned by her children, the love of a stranger who never forgot them, the cruelty of some, and the kindness of others. It was too much to process all at once. Justin was crying too now, leaning against the wall, watching this incredible scene unfold. "There is something else," said Robert, and there was a touch of something dark in his voice now. "William made me include a special clause in his will. He specifically instructed me that once you signed the documents and the inheritance was officially yours, I was to contact your 4 children and explain to them exactly what had happened." Mary looked up sharply. "Why?" Robert smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Because William investigated your situation. He discovered how your children had treated you, how they had taken everything from you and never given anything back. He discovered you were about to be left homeless, and he wanted your children to know that the couple they abandoned, whom they treated as a burden, had just become multi-millionaires. He wanted them to live with that knowledge." Arthur laughed bitterly. "Revenge?" "Justice," corrected Robert. "William told me that if it weren't for your kindness, he would have died in that alley 40 years ago. He said you sacrificed for him when you had no reason to do so, when you had your own family to feed, and he wanted to make sure your children knew the value of what they threw away." Mary didn't know how to feel about that. Part of her wanted her children to know. She wanted them to feel, even just a little, of the pain they had caused her. But another part, the part that was still a mother who had loved those children from the moment they were born, simply felt sadness. Sadness, because her children had lost something more precious than money. They had lost their humanity. "When will you tell them?" she asked. "Today," replied Robert. "Once you sign these documents, I will personally go visit all 4 of them and tell them exactly what their mother and father inherited and exactly when they inherited it." 24 hours after being abandoned on a road, Mary closed her eyes. She imagined her children's faces when they found out. She imagined Mason's disbelief, Harper's rage, Caleb's frustration, Emily's regret. Or would it be? "Okay," she said finally. "Do it." Robert placed the documents in front of them and handed them a pen. Mary looked at the paper, saw her name written there, saw the impossible figures that now represented her future. "Before signing," said Arthur suddenly, "I need to know something. Did William have a good life? Was he happy?" Robert smiled genuinely for the first time. He married 35 years ago to a wonderful woman. They had 3 children together, all adults, successful. He told me his greatest pride was breaking the cycle, that his children grew up knowing the value of love and gratitude because he taught them, because you had taught him. He died surrounded by his family, in peace, knowing he had lived a life of purpose. So yes, Mr. Arthur, William was very, very happy. Arthur nodded, tears flowing freely down his face. "Then, it was worth it," he said. "It was all worth it." And with trembling hands, they both signed the documents. Robert Stevenson carefully packed the signed papers into his briefcase. "The transfer of funds will begin tomorrow," he explained. "It should be completed in about a week. In the meantime, I have authorization from the estate to provide you with an immediate advance. Here is a cashier's check for $50,000 so you can start getting organized immediately." He took out an envelope containing the check and placed it on the table. Mary looked at it as if it were an alien object. This is too much," she whispered. "I can't." "You can and you will," interrupted Robert gently. "This is William's will. He wanted this for you. Please, respect his wishes by accepting it." Justin came closer then, wiping tears from his own eyes. "This is incredible," he said with a broken voice. You showed kindness when you had no reason to. And now, the universe has strange ways of balancing things," said Robert. "It doesn't always happen. Kindness isn't always rewarded, and cruelty punished. But sometimes the stars align in the right way. He stood up and extended his hand toward Mary and Arthur. "It has been an honor meeting you," he said. "William spoke of you with such reverence, such gratitude. Now I understand why people like you are rare in this world." "We just did the right thing," said Mary, still dazed by it all. "Nothing more." "Exactly," replied Robert, "and that is exactly what makes it extraordinary." After Robert left, promising to return in a few days with more documents and details about the house and other properties, Mary, Arthur, and Justin sat in silence for a long moment. "My God," said Justin finally. "I can't believe what just happened." "Neither can we," admitted Arthur, looking at the envelope full of money on the table. "Less than 24 hours ago we were standing in the rain, abandoned by our own children, without a penny and without hope. And now, you are millionaires." Finished Justin, shaking his head with amazement. "It's like a fairy tale." But Mary didn't feel like she was in a fairy tale. The pain in her heart from her children's betrayal hadn't disappeared with the appearance of the money. If anything, it felt sharper now, more cutting. Because now she knew with absolute certainty that her children hadn't abandoned her out of necessity or desperation. They had abandoned her out of pure selfishness, out of a lack of basic humanity. "Money doesn't fix everything," said Mary quietly. "It doesn't bring my children back. It doesn't erase what they did." Arthur took her hand. "I don't agree, but it gives us the opportunity to live the rest of our lives with dignity, to not have to depend on anyone, to help others perhaps like we helped William." Mary nodded slowly. Yes, that was true. They could do good with this money. They could honor William's gift by using it to show kindness to others who needed it. "Justin," said Mary, turning to the young man, "you helped us when no one else would. We didn't know you at all, and yet you gave us shelter, food, kindness. We want to." "No," interrupted Justin firmly. "You don't owe me anything. What I did because it was the right thing. Just like you with William. I don't need a reward for being a decent human being." "It's not a reward," insisted Arthur. "It's gratitude. And we, better than anyone, know how important it is to express gratitude." Justin looked at them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then I will accept your gratitude," he said. "But I don't need money. What I do need—" He hesitated, as if deciding whether to continue. "My gas station is struggling. It has been struggling for years. If I could modernize it, install new pumps, do some renovations, I could turn it into something better. I could make it successful. Then, that is what we will do," said Mary without hesitation. "We will help you save your business because you saved us." And so, in that small gas station office on December 26th, a bond was formed between three people, a bond based on kindness, on humanity, on the simple, profound idea that we must help one another when we can. The rest of the day was a blur of activity. Robert returned with a financial advisor who began helping Mary and Arthur understand what they now owned. He explained investments, savings accounts, real estate. He told them about the house that now belonged to them, a beautiful 4-bedroom property in a quiet neighborhood with a garden and a view of the lake. "William bought it specifically for you," explained the lawyer. "He spent months looking for the perfect house. He wanted it to be a place where you could be happy, where you could spend your final years in peace." Mary cried again, hearing that. The idea that this man, this young man they had helped so long ago, had dedicated so much thought and care to their well-being, was overwhelming. At nightfall, Robert left to fulfill his promise. He was going to visit each of Mary and Arthur's 4 children to inform them of their parents' inheritance. "Do you want to know how they react?" he asked before leaving. Mary and Arthur exchanged glances. Part of Mary wanted to know if they would feel anything, if there would be even a moment of regret, but another part didn't want to know anything. She didn't want to contaminate this new beginning with the pain of the past. "No," she said finally. "We don't need to know. They made their choice. We will make ours." Robert nodded with approval. "Wise words," he said. "But I will still fulfill William's will. They will know what they lost." And he left, leaving Mary and Arthur in the gas station with Justin, 3 people united by extraordinary circumstances, by kindness in moments of darkness. That night, Mary and Arthur slept on the same sofa where they had spent the previous night, but everything was different. Now the whole world was different. In 24 hours, they had fallen to the deepest bottom of despair and been lifted to heights they could never have imagined possible. "Arthur," whispered Mary in the dark, "is this really happening, or are we going to wake up and discover it was just a dream?" "If it's a dream," he replied, squeezing her hand, "then I am dreaming with you as I have done for 62 years. Mary smiled in the darkness. 62 years. Through everything, poverty, struggle, joy, pain, betrayal, and now this unexpected blessing, he had been by her side, and she had been by his. "I love you," she said. "I love you," he replied. And as they fell asleep, hugging on that old sofa, surrounded by the boxes of a gas station, Mary realized something important. The money hadn't changed what mattered most. What mattered was the love they shared, the integrity with which they had lived their lives, the kindness they had shown even when they had nothing to give. That is what William had seen in them 40 years ago, not their wealth or status, because they had neither. He had seen their humanity, and that finally was what had been rewarded. Somewhere in the city, Robert Stevenson was knocking on Mason's door, the first son. In his hands, he carried documents that would change the lives of 4 people, only not in the way those 4 people would have wanted. But Mary didn't think about that. Now she thought about the future, about the house by the lake, about the ways they could help others like Justin, about the opportunity to live their final years with dignity and peace. She thought about William, a dying young man they had saved with a simple act of kindness, and she wondered how many other Williams there were in the world waiting for someone to extend a hand. She promised herself she would use this unexpected blessing to do exactly that. She would extend her hand, show kindness, honor William's gift by living the way she and Arthur had always lived, with love, with compassion, with humanity. And as she slipped into sleep, a smile touched her lips, because finally, after a lifetime of giving, the universe had given them something back, not because they had expected or demanded it, but simply because that's how things work sometimes. Kindness has a way of returning. The next morning, Robert Stevenson returned to the gas station. It was 10 o'clock, and his expression was a complex mix of satisfaction and disgust. "Did you do it?" asked Mary when she saw him enter. "I did," replied Robert, taking a seat in the small office where Mary, Arthur, and Justin waited for him. "I visited all 4 last night and early this morning." He paused as if deciding how much to tell them. Finally, he sighed. "I promised William, so you must know at least something," he said. "When I walked into Mason's office and showed him the certified valuation of the estate," Robert began, a grim satisfaction in his tone. He literally dropped his coffee mug. It shattered on the floor. He turned pale, then red. He started pounding his fist on the table, screaming, "That's my money! That's my birthright!" He actually tried to grab the file from my hands, demanding I transfer the funds to him immediately to cover his gambling debts. I had to threaten to call security. Robert took a breath, his expression hardening. Harper was even worse. She was at a beauty salon. When I told her the amount, she stopped laughing at you. She froze. Then she looked at me with cold calculation and asked, "So, when do they die?" When I told her the trust is locked, so that not a single penny goes to any biological child upon your passing, she had a complete meltdown. She threw her phone across the room, screaming that you were selfish old fools stealing her future. She didn't mourn the relationship, Mary. She mourned the credit card limit she just lost. It is truly chilling to hear that Harper's first instinct was to ask when her parents would die. That level of greed is hard to stomach, but it certainly proves that William was right to lock that trust fund tight. But don't go anywhere, because we still haven't heard about Caleb and Emily. Will they be just as heartless? Or is there a shred of conscience left in this family? Let's find out. Justin, who had been listening in silence, exploded. How can anyone be so lacking in humanity? "Caleb," finished Robert. "It's the only word I can find." Caleb reacted similarly, although a bit more controlled. He tried to use logic, arguing that since his parents were elderly and didn't need so much money, they should distribute it among their children now, as if it were their right. Mary closed her eyes. Every word was another stab, another confirmation that the children she had raised really were as selfish as their actions had shown. "And Emily?" she asked, clinging to a thread of hope that at least one of her children showed some regret. Robert hesitated. "Emily was different," he admitted. When I told her, she stayed silent for a long time. Then she began to cry. She said that what they had done was unforgivable, that she had been a coward for going along with her siblings. She asked if there was any way she could see you, talk to you. Mary felt a small spark of something in her chest. Hope? Or just the desperate wish that at least one of her children still had a heart. But then, continued Robert, and his voice hardened, her husband entered the room. He heard what we were talking about and told Emily to stop being foolish, that they should hire a lawyer and fight for a share of the inheritance. He said that after all the years you bled your children dry with requests for help, it was fair that they received compensation. Now, the small spark of hope died. And Emily? Asked Mary, although she already knew the answer. What did Emily say? She said nothing, replied Robert with sadness. She just looked at the floor while her husband kept talking about lawyers and lawsuits. She didn't object, didn't defend her position, simply gave in. Arthur stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his shoulders shaking. Mary knew he was trying not to cry in front of the others, to maintain the composure that had been his armor all his life. So, that's it, said Mary, her voice hollow. We really lost. We lost our 4 children, not to death, which at least would have dignity. We lost them to greed, to selfishness, to a lack of basic humanity. I don't see it that way, said Justin softly. You didn't lose them. You never really had them. These people, your children became. They lost themselves somewhere along the way. Justin is right, added Robert. I've been an attorney for 25 years. I've seen all kinds of families, all kinds of relationships, and I can tell you with certainty that your children are the aberration, not you. Most people, when their elderly parents need help, give it with love. Your children are the exception, not the rule. But they were our children, whispered Mary. We raised them. We must have done something wrong, taught something wrong. No, said Robert firmly. William told me what you were like. He told me how you took care of him, a complete stranger, when your own children were small. He told me how your house was always open to anyone who needed help. He told me that you modeled kindness, generosity, and love every day of your lives. If your children didn't learn those lessons, it's because they chose not to. Arthur returned from the window. His eyes were red but dry. Did you mention the lawsuits? He asked. Are they going to try to sue us for the money? Robert nodded seriously. It's possible. Probably they will. But I want you to know that William anticipated this. The inheritance is structured in such a way that it is completely proof against legal attacks. There is no way they can claim even a cent. William worked with the best estate lawyers in the country to ensure that. But they will still try, said Mary. Not as a question, but as a fact. Probably, admitted Robert, but they will fail. And honestly, Mrs. Mary, do you want people in your life who only want to be there for your money? People who abandoned you on a road in the rain without thinking twice? It was a rhetorical question, but Mary answered it anyway. No, she said. I don't want that. I am their mother, and I will always love them in some way, but I cannot have them in my life. No, after this I can't. And you don't have to, said Arthur, taking her hand. We have each other. That is enough. It has always been enough. Robert stayed a while longer, answering questions about logistics, about the house, about how to access the funds. He explained that they could move into the house at any time, that it was fully furnished and ready for them. William hired an interior designer, he explained. He told him exactly what style he wanted. Comfortable, cozy, a place where older people could live with ease and dignity. There are grab bars in the bathrooms, a modern but easy-to-use kitchen, a bedroom on the ground floor so you don't have to climb stairs if you don't want to. Mary marveled again at William's thoughtfulness. 40 years after they helped him, 40 years of living his own successful life, he had still thought of every detail of their well-being. Can we see the house today? Asked Robert. He smiled. I expected you to ask that. I have the keys here. We can go right now if you want. During the ride to the house, Mary looked out the window of Robert's car, watching the world pass by. It was December 27th. Now 2 days ago they had celebrated what they thought would be a Christmas dinner with their children. 2 days ago they had no idea their lives were about to change so dramatically and painfully. And now, just 2 days later, they were on their way to a house they could never have dreamed of owning, with a fortune that ensured they would never have to worry about money again. Life was strange, cruel, and kind in equal measures. The house was in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by trees, and with a beautiful view of the lake behind. It was 2 stories, painted a soft blue with white shutters, a stone path wound to the front door, bordered by gardens that even in winter showed signs of meticulous care. "It's beautiful," whispered Mary as they got out of the car. "Wait until you see the inside," said Robert, clearly excited to show them. He opened the front door and guided them inside. The living room was spacious, but cozy, with comfortable furniture in warm tones, a gas fireplace that was probably easy to operate, and large windows that let in lots of natural light. The walls were decorated with simple but elegant art. Nothing ostentatious, everything designed to create a sense of peace and home. The kitchen was modern with new appliances, but also practical. The cabinets were easy to reach. The floor was non-slip. There was ample space to move around. Upstairs, there were 3 more bedrooms, but as Robert had mentioned, there was also a complete master bedroom on the ground floor. Mary entered this room and stopped dead in her tracks. The bed was large and looked incredibly comfortable, with sheets that looked high quality. There was a vanity with a large mirror, a spacious closet and French doors that opened onto a small back patio with a view of the lake. On the nightstand there was a note. With trembling hands, Mary picked it up and read it aloud. "Dear Mary and Arthur, if you are reading this, it means I have died, but it also means I finally found you. I have waited 40 years to thank you properly. You didn't just give me a sofa or a meal that winter night. You gave me dignity when the world saw me as trash. You showed me unconditional love when I had nothing to offer in return. I never forgot, not a single day. Every success I had, every goal I achieved, was thanks to the second chance you gave me. I built my life on the foundation of love that you showed me. I tried to find you over the years, but I moved so often in those early years and lost track of where you had lived. It wasn't until I was diagnosed with terminal cancer that I finally hired professionals to look for you seriously. I hope this house, this money, gives you even a fraction of the peace and happiness you gave me. I hope you live your final years without worries, surrounded by beauty and comfort. But more than anything, I hope you know this. You didn't just save a life that night. You changed a life, and that life in turn touched countless others. I have 3 wonderful children who grew up knowing the importance of kindness because I told them your story over and over again. I have employees whose lives improved because I tried to run my company with the same values you modeled for me. The impact of your kindness spread far beyond me. It spread through the lives of everyone I touched. That is the true magic of kindness. It multiplies. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for taking care of me when no one else would. Thank you for showing me there is kindness in this world. Live well, live happily, and if you can, show others the same kindness you showed me. With eternal gratitude and love, William Peterson. By the time Mary finished reading, everyone in the room was crying. Even Robert, who had probably read the letter before, was wiping his eyes surreptitiously. Arthur hugged Mary, and they stayed like that for a long time, crying together for everything they had lost and everything they had gained, for the cruelty they had experienced and the kindness they had received. "He understood," whispered Mary. "He really understood what it means to love without conditions. And he tried to give it back," added Arthur. "In his way, he tried to create the same kind of love in the world that you showed him." They moved into the house that same afternoon. They didn't have much to bring, just the 2 soaked suitcases from that terrible night. But Robert assured them they could buy whatever they needed, that the money was there to be used. Justin came with them, helping them settle in. There was a connection between them now, a bond forged in extraordinary circumstances. They agreed that Mary and Arthur would give him the money to renovate his gas station. But more than that, they agreed to stay in touch, to be part of each other's lives. "You are like a grandson to us," Mary told Justin as he helped her unpack. "The grandson we never knew we needed." Justin blushed, but smiled. "You are like the grandparents I lost," he admitted. "And this time, I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to honor their memory by being good to you." That night, their first night in the house, Mary and Arthur sat on the back patio despite the cold, looking at the lake. The stars were beginning to appear in the sky, small points of light in the darkness. "Do you regret it?" asked Arthur suddenly. "Do you regret helping William that night? If we hadn't done it, our children might have had more. maybe they would have grown up different. Mary thought about that for a long moment. Then she shook her head. No, she said with certainty. I don't regret it, because helping William was the right thing, and raising our children with love was the right thing. The fact that they chose not to value that is not our failure, it is theirs. William turned out better than our own children, said Arthur bitterly. A stranger we knew for 8 months showed us more gratitude and love than the children we raised for decades. Maybe that's the point, said Mary slowly, the pieces beginning to fit in her mind. Maybe William understood the value of what we gave him because he knew what it was not to have it. He had lived on the streets, had been rejected by the whole world. So when we showed him kindness, he really saw it, really appreciated it. And our children? Asked Arthur. Our children never knew what it was not to have, continued Mary. We gave them too much, too easily. They never had to struggle, never had to go without. So for them, our sacrifices became expectations. They didn't see them as gifts of love, but as obligations we owed them. It was a painful truth, but once Mary said it aloud, she felt a small part of the guilt lift from her shoulders. They hadn't failed as parents. They had loved too well, had protected too fiercely, and their children, instead of appreciating that, had taken it for granted. Do you think they will ever come back? Asked Arthur. That they will ever understand what they did? Mary looked at the stars thinking about that question. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe someday when they are old like us, when they see their own lives coming to an end, maybe then they will understand. Maybe then they will feel regret. But I can't wait for that day, Arthur. I can't live my life waiting for them to change. Then what do we do? He asked. Mary turned to look at him. This man who had been her partner for 62 years, who had been by her side through everything. We live, she said. Simply live the way we always have, with love, with kindness, with integrity. We use this gift William gave us to do good in the world. We help people like Justin. We show others the same compassion we showed William. And our children? Asked Arthur. What do we do with them? Mary felt tears stinging her eyes again. We let them go, she whispered. That is perhaps the hardest decision a parent can ever make, to love from a distance for their own survival. Mary and Arthur are finally rebuilding their lives with the family they chose, rather than the one they were born with. But hold on, because just as they start to heal, a knock on the door is about to test that resolve. Is it possible for people to truly change? You won't want to miss what happens next. We love them from afar, but we let them go because we can't change them. And we can't live our lives trying to win the love of people who have proven to be incapable of giving it. Arthur nodded slowly, and Mary saw her own tears reflected on his cheeks. It's the end, then he said. End of our family as we knew it. No, corrected Mary. It's the beginning of a new family, one we choose, not one we were born into. Justin, Robert, the people we will meet and help with this money. That will be our family now. They sat in silence after that, hugging under the stars, crying for what they had lost, but also finding peace in what they had gained. It wasn't the life they had imagined. It wasn't the end of the story they had hoped for. But it was theirs, and they would face it together as they always had. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. They opened bank accounts, met with financial advisors, learned about investments and trusts. It was overwhelming at times, but also exciting. For the first time in their lives, they didn't have to worry about every cent. They didn't have to choose between medication and food. And true to their word, they gave Justin the money to renovate his gas station. But not only that, they also established a fund so he could go to college, if he wished, so he would have the opportunities his kindness deserved. Robert became a regular visitor, helping them navigate their new reality. He introduced them to estate lawyers who helped them create their own will, ensuring that their money would eventually go to charities and people like Justin, people who showed kindness in the world. We don't want a cent to go to our children, said Mary firmly when they discussed the will, neither now nor ever. Let them learn to live with the consequences of their actions. The lawyer nodded without judgment. He had heard the story. He knew what had happened. 2 weeks after moving into the house, the doorbell rang. Mary was in the kitchen making tea when she heard Arthur open the door. Then she heard voices, Arthur's and another she would recognize anywhere. Emily. Mary froze, the kettle shaking in her hand. She wasn't ready for this. She didn't know if she would ever be ready. She walked slowly toward the front door. Emily stood on the threshold, looking smaller than Mary remembered. Her eyes were red and swollen as if she had been crying for days. "Mom," she said when she saw Mary, and her voice broke completely. "Please, please, let me talk to you." Arthur looked at Mary, leaving the decision in her hands. Mary felt her heart tearing. This was her baby, her youngest daughter, the girl she had cradled when she cried, whom she had comforted after nightmares, whom she had helped with homework late into the night. But she was also the woman who had abandoned her on a road in the rain on Christmas. 5 minutes, said Mary finally, her voice cold. "You have 5 minutes." Emily entered, her movements unsure. She stood in the living room, clearly impressed by the house, but also clearly too distressed to care about that. "I'm sorry," she began, the words coming out in a torrent. "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I followed Mason and Harper and Caleb." "Why?" "Because I've always followed them. My whole life I've been the youngest, the one who just does what others say. And when they said you were a burden that we needed to," she stopped, struggling to control her voice. "I know it's not an excuse. Nothing is an excuse. We abandoned you. We left you there in the rain, and I've been sick with guilt ever since then." Mary stood firm, her face a mask of calm, although inside she was a whirlwind. "Did you come because you feel guilt, Emily? Or did you come because you found out about the money?" Emily recoiled as if slapped. "I came because the guilt is eating me alive," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Yes, I know about the inheritance. Robert told us everything. And yes, Richard wants me to fight for a share, to hire a lawyer." She paused, wiping a tear angrily from her cheek. "But I don't care about the money anymore. I just want my parents back. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror again." "Is your husband outside?" asked Arthur sharply. Emily shook her head. "He doesn't know I'm here. He thought I was at work. If he knew, he would tell me I'm being foolish, that I should be fighting for a share of the inheritance instead of begging for forgiveness." "And what do you think about that?" asked Mary. "What do you think of a husband who tells you to fight for money instead of seeking reconciliation with your parents?" Emily looked at the floor. I think I married the wrong man." The silence that followed was heavy. Mary looked at this woman, because she was no longer a child. She was a 2-year-old adult woman, and she felt a complex mix of emotions. Love because Emily was still her daughter. Pain for the betrayal she had committed. Sadness, because even now, Emily seemed incapable of taking full responsibility for her actions, blaming her husband and siblings instead. "Emily," said Mary finally, her voice soft but firm, "I love you. I will always love you, because you are my daughter. But I cannot have you in my life right now. I cannot pretend that what you did didn't happen, or that a simple, 'I'm sorry' fixes it." "Please," pleaded Emily. "I'll do whatever you need." "What I need," said Mary, feeling the tears begin to flow down her own cheeks, "is time. I need time to heal. I need time to discover who I am in this new reality. And you need to discover who you are. Not the little sister who follows others, not the wife who does what her husband tells her. You, Emily, need to discover what Emily stands for when you are not simply following others." "How do I do that?" asked Emily, her voice small, almost childish. "That is a question only you can answer," said Arthur. "But until you figure it out, until you can look at yourself in the mirror and honestly say you are a good person who makes good choices, we cannot be part of your life." Emily collapsed, then falling to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Mary felt every maternal instinct inside her screaming to go comfort her, to hug her, to tell her everything would be okay. But she didn't, because everything was not okay. And comforting her now would be teaching her that actions don't have consequences, that a parent's love is infinite regardless of how terrible a child's behavior is. And Mary had finally learned that was a lie. Love could be infinite, but presence didn't have to be. You could love someone from afar. You could love someone and still protect yourself from their capacity to hurt you. "Go now," Emily said Mary, her voice breaking. "Go and find who you are. And if someday you become someone who has learned the right lessons from this, if someday you can show me not with words, but with actions that you have changed, then maybe we can talk again." Emily got up slowly, her face soaked in tears. She looked at her parents for a long moment, as if trying to memorize them. "I love you," she whispered. "I have always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it in the right way." And then she left, closing the door softly behind her. Mary collapsed onto the sofa as soon as the door closed, and Arthur sat next to her, hugging her while she cried. It was possibly one of the hardest moments of her life, rejecting her daughter when her daughter came asking for forgiveness. But Mary knew in her heart it was the right thing. Forgiveness couldn't come so easily, not after such a deep betrayal. Emily needed to earn it, not with words, but with real change, with real growth, and Mary needed to protect her own heart. Meanwhile, the months passed. Mary and Arthur settled into their new life. They used their money to help others, establishing scholarships for low-income students, donating to shelters for homeless people, helping small businesses like Justin's. They became de facto grandparents to Justin's children when he eventually married. They became friends with their neighbors, many of whom were also older people, enjoying their golden years. And slowly, very slowly, the pain began to heal. It didn't disappear. It would never disappear completely, but it became something they could live with, a scar instead of an open wound. Occasionally, they received news of their children through Robert, who had become a close friend. Mason had tried to sue for the inheritance and had lost, spending thousands of dollars in legal fees in the process. Harper had begun bad-mouthing them on social media, painting herself as a victim of cruel parents. Caleb had simply disappeared from their lives completely, as if they had never existed. And Emily had divorced her husband. She had started therapy, had started doing volunteer work at a homeless shelter. She hadn't tried to contact them again, but Robert told them she was changing, growing, becoming a better version of herself. Mary didn't know if she would ever be ready to have Emily in her life again, but at least she could see her daughter was trying, was doing the work. That was something. A year after the day they were abandoned on that road, Mary and Arthur sat on the same back patio where they had had that conversation about letting their children go. It was Christmas again, but this time it was different. Justin was there with his new girlfriend. Robert had come with his wife and 2 teenage children. There were neighbors who had become dear friends. The house was full of laughter, love, and the aroma of delicious food Mary had spent days preparing. This was her new family, not the family into which they were born, but the family they had chosen, which had chosen them. Happy? Asked Arthur, taking Mary's hand. Mary looked around at all these people who loved them genuinely, who were there not out of obligation or for money, but because they truly enjoyed their company. Yes, she said, surprised to realize it was true. I am happy. It wasn't the happiness she had imagined. It wasn't the image of being surrounded by her children and grandchildren, all gathered, celebrating like a traditional family. But it was real. It was genuine. And it was enough. That night, after everyone left, Mary found a letter in the mailbox. She recognized it immediately. It was Emily's handwriting. With trembling hands, she opened it. Dear Mom and Dad, I don't expect a reply to this letter. I just need to tell you a few things. I have spent the last year in therapy, working on myself, trying to understand how I became someone capable of abandoning her own parents. I have come to realize many painful things about myself. I realized I spent my whole life being a follower. I let Mason, Harper, and Caleb dictate who I was, what I thought, what I did. I married a man who did the same. I never developed my own voice, my own values, but that is not an excuse. At the end of the day, it was I who made the decision to get in that SUV. It was I who sat there in silence while my siblings abandoned you on a dark road. It was I who said nothing, who didn't fight for you, who chose my own comfort over your well-being. That is something I will have to live with for the rest of my life. Silence is an action, Emily, Mary cut in, her voice trembling not with sadness, but with a newfound strength. You didn't just sit there. You watched your father struggle to stand up in the mud. You watched the rain soak my hair. You held the door open for your siblings' cruelty, and by doing nothing, you slammed it in our faces just as hard as Mason did. You aren't a victim of your siblings. You are their accomplice. That is a powerful and necessary truth that Mary just delivered. Sometimes silence hurts just as much as the shouting. It takes incredible strength for a mother to set that boundary with her own daughter. But stick around to see if Emily actually learns from this hard lesson or if she stays lost like the others. I want you to know that I divorced Richard. I realized that a man who would tell me to sue my own parents instead of seeking reconciliation is not a man who reflects my values, or rather, doesn't reflect the values I want to have. I have been doing volunteer work at a homeless shelter. Every person I help, I think of you. I think of how you spent your lives helping others, even when you didn't have much to give. I think of William and how you saved him. I am trying to be like you. I know I never will be, but I am trying. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I am writing simply to tell you that I finally understand. I understand what I lost that night on the road. I didn't just lose my parents. I lost my chance to be the kind of person you deserved as a daughter. I hope you are happy. I hope William gave you the life you always deserved, and I hope that although I cannot be part of it, you know I love you. I have always loved you. I just didn't know how to show you that love in a way that mattered. Merry Christmas. With love and eternal regret, Emily. Mary read the letter 3 times, then passed it to Arthur and watched him as he read it, seeing the emotions playing on his face. "What do you think?" she asked when he finished. Arthur sighed deeply. "I think she is trying. Really trying. But we're not ready," completed Mary. "Not yet. Not yet," agreed Arthur. They put the letter away, not to throw it out, but to keep it. Maybe someday, when the wound had healed a little more, when they could think of Emily without feeling the full weight of the pain of that night, maybe then they could consider opening that door again. But not today, not yet. For now they had their new life, their new family, their new opportunity to live with dignity and peace. They had each other. 63 years of unbreakable love. They had the extraordinary gift William had given them, not just the money, but the validation that their kindness had meant something, that it had changed a life fundamentally, and they had the opportunity to continue that legacy, to show others the same compassion they had shown William, to create ripples of kindness that would extend far beyond their own life. At the end, that was what mattered, not how much money you had, or how many children you had, or if your family was traditional. What mattered was how you lived, how you treated others, what kind of impact you left on the world. Mary and Arthur had lived with kindness, had loved deeply, and in the end, that love had returned to them in the most unexpected way. Kindness always finds its way back. Sometimes it takes 40 years. Sometimes it comes from the people you least expect. But always, always, it returns. And as Mary and Arthur sat together in their beautiful house by the lake, with their hearts still scarred but healing, with their future secure for the first time in their lives, they knew they had done it right. They had lived well, and that finally was enough. After 62 years of sacrifice, Mary and Arthur were told they were expired. On a freezing Christmas night, their 4 children dumped them on the side of a deserted road, handing them a wet envelope with just $200 inside. That was the price they put on their parents' lives. But while they were shivering in the rain, a ghost from their past was frantically searching for them. They didn't know it yet, but a single act of kindness from 40 years ago was about to explode into an $8 million miracle. And when the sun rose the next morning, the tables turned in a way that would make their greedy children regret the day they were born. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. There are stories that, no matter how painful, must still be told.